the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such idiots in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Well, hello and welcome to HBR Talk 333. I may have screwed up the numbers again. I gotta look, but I think that's right. And anyway, title is What's the Deal, Joe? Because he's always saying, here's the deal, and boy, did he hand one out to his son. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson.
Hello, Joe! Someone had... the Simpsons reference? Everyone knows every Simpsons reference ever, right? No. Hello,
no.
Joe! No.
and nonsense annihilator Lauren Brooks. And tonight we are going we are going really into the muck. It's going to seem like we're going into the weeds, but we're not. We'll be talking about the Biden pardon for what it's worth, and it looks like it's worth quite a bit. And quite a bit of what we'll be talking about is related to something that we see a lot in arguments with feminists about men's issues. So there's a variety of different fallacies that feminists employ in their arguments. One of the most common, and we've talked about it, is the Mott-Bailey fallacy, where they say something that sounds completely reasonable, but they're only using it in defense of something that is completely unreasonable. But in this case, the apex fallacy is the treatment of the idea that there are men in charge, or more men in charge than there are women, as a piece of evidence that all men have privilege. So because a man is president, a homeless guy has it much, much easier than, say, a woman who is a single mom and is receiving assistance from the government and extorting her baby daddy for child support and so on. Okay, so I'm getting that I'm really quiet and Mike's really loud. Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. Alright, hopefully, I've turned myself up as high as I can possibly get. This is the only way
I will attempt to speak as softly and chocolatey as possible.
Yes, there we go.
But I warn you, I'm quite drunk, so this may be a struggle.
I might have you turned up in Discord too. And it's not going to let me look. Oh, there we go. So let's see what happens if I take that down a notch. We'll see. But it's quite a challenging thing trying to deal with this in OBS, and I still haven't found a workaround that I like that seems like it's gonna work. So there you go. Anyway, so back to the apex fallacy. If a man is the king, then paupers are more privileged than the middle class if they're male, and the middle class is female, right? And before anybody complains that I'm comparing single moms to the middle class, there are single moms who get more economic benefit, as in the stuff that they have would cost more if they bought it themselves. They get more economic benefit from the government, and from which is really from you, especially if you're a man, because you're paying the taxes that go into that, and from their baby daddies, than I get from my full-time job, and I'm considered middle class. So,
and you just have to notice that you don't hear a lot of leftists saying, "Look what Melania Trump gets. Look what Jill Biden gets. Look what the top end of the Hollywood ladies get."
Nope, not at all.
Look what Taylor Swift gets. Look what Beyonce gets. Look whatever the biggest actress is these days. I don't even know these things. Even I. But no one does that. No, even the most uncharitable stereotype of an MRA MGTOW. So, when you're doing that sort of shit, and even they don't say, "Well, Scarlett Johansson exists, and therefore the plight of the working class women doesn't matter." This is very much only applied in this direction, and it's always women talking about how, look, there's a man with an enormous amount of power, and therefore women have no power. It encompasses everything that feminism has ever meant and has ever meant to meant.
Yep. And it's bigger than people think about too, because when we are talking about apex fallacy in regard to, well, you say men are in power because there is a man, or there are more men in government positions than there are women. Maybe there are. Maybe more men are inclined to take government responsibility. More men are inclined to take the risks involved and so on in the public life, because they do get death threats. They have had some pretty scary shit sent to them. There are poisons that are out there that come in the form of like a white powder that if it just touches your skin, you're fucked. And there have been times when people have sent envelopes that looked like that's what it contained, and there have been times when people have sent envelopes that did contain that to public officials. It's like a terrifying prospect. Somebody can send you something in the mail, and you open it, and you're poisoned in an irreversible way, and you are going to die in it. It's going to suck the whole time. Not just because you're dying, right? And so, yeah, when it comes to risk, men are the ones that step up usually. Women don't step up as frequently. They usually have men to protect them. And so men do end up at that apex, sure. But that apex fallacy has another effect, right? The men at the top that have all that power, they don't care about the men at the bottom. Case in point, the biggest attacks on due process during the 20th century, which are still continued into this century, which are still affecting your due process rights if you live in the United States, they are still impacting what will happen if you are falsely accused of a violent crime. They are still affecting what will happen if you are in a custody battle and your baby mama or wife decides to use false allegations as a weapon against you in that custody battle. Those were written by Joe Biden, Mr. Apex. Right? Those were, your life has been impacted by Mr. Apex, but there is nothing you can do to him for that. The most you can do is vote him out of office, and he is still Mr. Apex, because he can still turn around and put his own son, after affecting your due process rights that way, after pulling the rug out from under you if you ever get falsely accused, right? He can put his son above the law. That's the apex fallacy right there in action. It's not just that all men don't share the power. It's that, just as feminists say about women, men are not a monolith. Men are not united in a way that causes them to never turn on each other and do terrible things to each other and cause each other pain and suffering. Just like women are not a monolith, and feminists are not a monolith, men are not a monolith. And so the apex fallacy is demonstrated to be the fallacy that it is, just by the fact that a man with the power of the president can get away with spending over 30 years attacking your due process rights systematically, institutionalizing his attacks on your due process rights, and then put his son above the law because apex. So before we get into all of that, let me get the window up so you can see. We're going to look at a few different things, including some statements on this, or at least a statement on this. This is Jonathan Turley. And let me see if I can fix the way that it looks here, because it's not showing the top of his comment like it was earlier. All I did was make the window invisible while I was talking, for Pete's sake. It shouldn't have moved. There we go. Now you can see that it's Jonathan Turley. So he points out, with his pardon, Joe Biden shredded any residue of veracity and credibility as president. For years, he was repeatedly asked if he met any of his son's clients. He lied and denied it. Let me open this further so we can see the rest of it, but I don't believe there's a lot more there. He was repeatedly asked if he was aware of Hunter's foreign dealings. He repeatedly lied and denied it. He was asked if he would pardon his son. He repeatedly lied and denied it. Notably, when he was running for re-election and denying that he would pardon Hunter, few believed him. Some of us noted that Hunter's bizarre legal strategy only made sense if he was told that in the worst-case scenario, his father would pardon him. So basically, if he was promised a pardon. But it does call into question now everything that Biden said, which I don't think anybody believed him to begin with. You know, oh yeah, I didn't have anything to do with my son's dealings. I don't think anybody believed that to begin with.
No.
Now, he has absolutely no excuse to even suggest that people should believe that. And it opens him up to being tried for it after the changeover, right?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but can't he pardon himself?
He might be able to, but that then brings into play the question of, are his pardons valid?
Yeah.
The fact that there was a 1-year spike in the number of people who voted that was rather large and suspicious. Like, the Trump administration could investigate whether the Biden administration was ever legitimate. And if they discover evidence that proves that Biden should never have occupied the White House, what happens to all of his pardons?
Well, I mean, that would be best case scenario, right? I think everybody who's on Trump's side is waiting for them to, well, maybe not everyone, right? Because some people just kind of got past it. They took it on the chin, said, okay, yeah, we lost, even though we really didn't. Because the problem is that holding these people accountable is damn near next to impossible. Yeah. I mean, if anybody could do what Trump could, but how long is that going to take? You know what I mean? And he's going to be out of office in 4 years. Is it really going to matter that much unless he if he pardons Fauci? Oh my God.
Yeah, that's going to be really, it's funny. Every time something like this happens, the question comes up, can the president pardon himself? And there are legal scholars on both sides of the argument, whether he can or not, and whether he should or not. And it would be a disaster for the president to pardon himself. But the consensus that I've seen before is technically he can, but they would consider it to be a disaster. It would be a very bad idea for the country if he did. But things being a bad idea for the country,
it's never stopped
that hasn't
before.
Stopped Biden, right?
No.
He doesn't seem to care about that at all.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And I don't know. He may pardon Fauci, which, there isn't anything that the public can do to stop him because he is the president.
Yeah.
But it may have repercussions on him later on. And the other one is the question of, and Troll with a Purpose is asking, will Biden declare martial law? Biden isn't going to do that. Not unless we get, like, an alien invasion or some shit like that happens.
Or a Russian invasion or something like that.
Yeah. A space alien invasion was what I was thinking of, not aliens from another country. But, yeah, it could be, and they could wag the dog. We don't have to have a real invasion, because I sincerely doubt Russia has any interest in invading the United States.
No.
The United States would be more likely to annex Canada than Russia would be to come all the way over here and put their men in our country trying to fight.
This is where the very existence of NATO turns this into a Play-Doh playground for the devil to do with what he will do with and so on. I mean, this whole thing has been the idea that Ukraine might become part of NATO, and Russia has gone, please don't. It's as though I'm trying to imagine the most Russian part of the USA, Florida. It's as though Florida was suddenly taken over by a Russian organization that can be compared with NATO, which I believe is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or what have you. Imagine if some kind of treaty had come right into what you consider your country.
Yeah.
And then they go.
It's actually...
I'm dancing around this without trying not to sound like a Putin apologist. But that's basically what the deal is between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is trying to become part of NATO, and Russia is trying to say, we don't like that. We would at least like to annex whatever part of Ukraine that we don't want to become part of NATO. Thank you very much. Because NATO was always supposed to be. This is how we try to keep Russia at bay, much like Israel is how we try to keep the Middle East at bay. That sort of thing. And now that I've dropped that bomb, I've lost the thread of what I was going to say.
Well, I will point out something.
I've already said the worst thing I could have said. So
and I've said this before too, and I've had people mad at me for saying it, but Ukraine becoming a NATO country with NATO bases, with an administration that was installed by the United States, and with the United States assisting that administration in armed enforcement of its own existence and its coverage of the entire country, despite portions of Ukraine having its population voluntarily ask to become part of Russia to get away from that administration. Like that little complexity there is Russia's version of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the United States. In my opinion, that is Russia experiencing what the U.S. experienced, when they were worried about nukes being positioned in Cuba by our enemies. Like, that's just as scary to be in a nation where the right next door you have this big base that has been put there by an organization that has treated your nation as an illegitimate nation forever, for its entire existence. In fact, that it was created for that purpose, right? To combat your nation. That would be terrifying.
Yeah, and that's entirely why this whole thing is even happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? And so what they're saying now is, oh, well, if Ukraine gives back this territory, then they can become a part of NATO. And it's like, that doesn't achieve any of these goals. It might get them to put down their weapons for a little bit, but it's still the same thing. It's still parking your ally in your backyard. It's ridiculous, and I'm no Russia apologist either, but I'm with Putin on this one. You know what I mean?
Honest. I think that it's not going to end until Trump gets in there, because Biden's not a deal maker. Right?
No.
He can tell you, here's the deal, as all day long, right? Here's the deal. Trump makes deals, and people agree to them. Like, he made deals with leaders of nations that don't agree with each other ever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant, and he's going to sanction the shit out of a bunch of countries when he does get into office, as he should, and the left is just going to cry about it. They're going to cry about every and anything that he does, because that's what they do. They're crybabies. They throw a temper tantrum when they don't get their way, as narcissists do.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm fully behind Putin in this situation right now. Yeah.
And my hope in this situation is, once we change which man is at the apex, and we will go from a man who is willing to use young men who don't want anything to do with this as pawns at the cost of their own lives, to a man who is going to put a stop to that practice. I'm hoping that Trump will prevent further military conflict and create an agreement that will lead to everybody that's been drafted into the Ukrainian military and the Russian military getting to go home and start to heal, and hopefully will preserve peace for the United States, because I don't want to see our guys, and it's not just because one of them is my son, but I don't want to see our guys getting drafted to go fight in a war that doesn't need to be happening in the first place. Heck, I don't even want to see our guys that are already in the military being sent.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does that even look like now? Because after COVID and the ones who didn't take the vaccine, they're now sat at home. Do you think those guys want to then take up arms just because it's Trump? No, I would think that they feel that they were wronged by this government, which they absolutely were. So was everyone in this country, across the globe. If they mandated that fucking vaccine, quote, in quotation marks, thank you, you were done wrong by your government. And I would never want to fight for a government. I don't want to fight for.
No one should ever fight for a government.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But what is our military going to look like? I think they're just all going to be a bunch of older guys. You know what I mean? I don't see these young kids, unless they draft them. I don't see them willing to go and fight for this.
Yeah, but that's pretty much what the draft is for.
Yeah.
Right. The draft doesn't exist because we have to force men to defend their country when their country is in trouble. The draft exists because when there isn't a reason for a war that is valid enough and serious enough and life-impacting enough to the people in our nation, that the men of our nation feel compelled by those reasons to step up, that they have a stake in the game, right? That the government needs, or wants at least, the power to make them go anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And that's wrong. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't happen. And it's one of the reasons. One of the reasons I don't entirely hate Richard Nixon. He was the one that was gonna end the draft. He wanted an all-volunteer military. He did not remain in office long enough to enact that. Ford had to do it, but it was his idea to end the draft. And of course, as soon as Carter got in, he reinstated it. And before anybody makes the statement, it's not a draft, the draft is not active. The draft is always active.
Always.
The first stage of the draft is making everybody sign up for all the men, because women don't have to do it, right? But making all the men sign up for selective service. Just like the first step of going to the grocery store is making your fucking shopping list. Okay?
Yeah.
The selective service registration is the shopping list. The second stage is when they start picking from that shopping list. Okay, these are the guys we're going to send. But we are always, as long as selective service is active, as long as men are required as soon as they reach legal manhood to sign up for selective service. We are always in the first stage of the draft. And no one should ever think of it any other way, because at any time, the second stage can be activated. There's not something that says, well, since we haven't done this for 40 years, we have to go through a longer and more complicated process. No, any time that the conditions occur that lead to a draft, which basically is the government gets us involved in a war that not enough people are going to sign up on their own to fight, then they will draft. They will draft from those who have signed up for selective service, right? And it doesn't even matter if you think the penalties aren't that bad, right? It's not your college education; it's his. It's not your name that a felony is attached to; it's his. When he doesn't sign up for selective service, it's not your benefits that are denied; it's his. And it's not your risk that the government will decide just on a dime that because they want to enact the second stage where they actually start drafting people, they're going to enforce it, and since it is a felony, they're going to jail you because you didn't sign up, right? It's his risk. You don't get to decide whether it's an acceptable risk or not, because it's not your risk, it's his risk.
Right. Right. And just remember what Kamala said. Thank God she didn't get into office. But remember what she said when she was prosecutor. With just the swipe of her pen, she can change your life. And that's exactly, any president has that ability when it comes to, in regards to the draft. You know, so I'm completely there with you. Like it's never just because, you know, they want to make you think that it's not on the table, but it absolutely is. You know,
Yep. And
it's
you know, this is one of those things that I think a lot of women don't have the frame of reference to understand. Because they've never been in a position.
They've never had to sacrifice.
Well, and it's not even women who have maybe had to take a job they didn't want because they had to fulfill a responsibility and obligation, or they needed money and couldn't get help or whatever. Women have there are things that men have faced that are related to the reasoning behind the obligation for the draft that women just don't face unless you go to dangerous places alone with your children.
Yeah.
Right. That being the Daniel Penny factor. Right.
Yeah.
You're in a public place and there is a disturbed man, an abnormal man there, and he's threatening people. And it doesn't matter whether it's because he's malicious or because he's got an illness that's gone untreated, whether it's because he's willful or it's because he's been neglected by society. If he's a danger to other people, you get treated like you have an obligation to stop him. You have an obligation to do so at his expense and potentially at your expense, health-wise and safety-wise. And if you don't, you get called a coward. And if you do, you get called a criminal. Right? Only guys are subjected to that. Ladies are exempt. Women are exempt. Only if your children are being threatened do you face that. And then a woman whose children are being threatened has the excuse that any reasonable person would do anything to protect their children, right? That's so it's still not quite the same. And it's women have been coddled. Women have been pampered. We are so surrounded by safety nets that we are the equivalent of the parody movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. What's it, Bubble Boy? Not The Boy on the Plastic, because the regular movie, the other movie was The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, but Bubble Boy. That's us. We are so shielded that we don't even know what's not hitting us.
Yep.
Right? Men are so vulnerable, they know everything that's not hitting them. And most of the time when something's not hitting them, it's because they have taken active measures to make sure of that. So their frame of reference for understanding selective service and understanding the draft is significantly different than our frame of reference. If there was a system like that would call women up and create vulnerability and risk and obligation, and it's not just any obligation either. This is the other thing a lot of women don't understand, because a lot of women, when they were growing up as little girls, they grew up in a culture, or a local culture at least, where little girls didn't tough out conflict with each other. If you got into a fight with another little girl, it was usually verbal, not physical, and maybe, social manipulation with other little girls, right? Most little girls didn't get fish hooked in the mouth by another little girl when they were 8 years old over a Faygo bottle that somebody wanted to use to put water in the sandbox at the park to make a little castle, like I did. Fish hooked in the mouth with a hand that had been in that sandbox, which the local parents also called the litter box because everybody's cats used it.
Oh.
I wasn't actually allowed to play in the sandbox, so it wouldn't have happened if I'd listened to my mom. But I mean, I grew up in a different situation. The only reason I can see this is because I grew up in that different situation. Y'all understand. My family lived in a part of a rough and tumble town where our recreation included things like going to the hobby store and getting 1-inch dowel rods and bringing them home and wrapping them up in towels and beating the hell out of each other with them for fun. We called it sword fighting. We were pretending they were swords, but they were just dowel rods with towels wrapped around them with macrame cord holding it on, and so they were a little bit kind of sort of cushioned. Like, you could hit each other pretty hard without leaving bruises. And in the fall, when all the leaves came off the willow trees, we used to take the long leaf branch that the little leaves would grow on and whip the hell out of each other with them. And, boxing in the backyard, jumping around on the monkey bars like it was solid ground. All that kind of risky fun. I don't know how to explain it to other people why that's fun, but you get to test yourself for how tough you are. Oh yeah, wiffle ball bats, troll with a purpose and nose. Yep, we used to hit each other with it, because if you hit just right and hard enough on skin with a wiffle ball bat, because it's hollow and because it's so fat and everything, it leaves this nice. It almost looks like a hive. The welt is weird. It's fat, and it just looks funny. So you have to see it. But or getting like, we played dodgeball at the park. The other kids were made to play dodgeball in gym class. We played dodgeball at the park. We played tackle football at the park. We had we had one game where we had a they put in our park as a play toy for us a drainage ditch liner that was about 4 feet high and had a little ladder on the side of it. And that thing was everything from a pirate ship to a spaceship to the last iceberg on Waterworld, before there was a movie about a Waterworld that we were all fighting over and pushed each other off of. And yeah, no padding. Hell, half the guys weren't even wearing. I was always on the shirts team, of course, but we did shirts and skins. Like, being a girl, I was always on shirts.
That's King of the Hill, right? That game when you got to fight to get to the top.
Oh yeah, King of the Hill. Then we had a game. I don't know. YouTube might actually penalize us for saying the name of the game. But it was smear, the word that rhymes with smear, that gets used as a normal part of gender mafia language, but if anybody else says it, it gets treated as a slur, especially in the context of that game. The game was, you throw a football up in the air, somebody catches it. That person is basically it, but it's like reverse tag. Everybody is trying to tackle that guy, and he has to get to the end zone. So you literally everybody's after you. Massive water wars, like super soakers, squirt guns, buckets, the hose. Everything was fair game. It was knockdown, drag out, right? So the only reason I can see this stuff is because I was that kid that might be in one tree and jump to another tree, just like the boys did. I was that kid that ended up at the bottom of a dog pile if I didn't run fast enough with my asthma and everything. And I was, so I understand the fighting end of it too. There was a video I made a few years ago about a fight I got into when I was in elementary school with a girl that was a couple of years older than me, that was not part of my neighborhood. She was a stranger to the neighborhood. And I hurt her. And I was worried because I hurt her. I felt really bad, too. But, I mean, she was trying to hurt me. Everybody tried to make me feel better about it. I just happened to kick her in the wrong place. And I knocked the wind out of her. And I thought I broke her ribs and punctured her lungs and she was going to suffocate to death. And I ran home to get my mom to save her and all kinds of stuff. She thought she was in trouble, so when she got her breath back, she ran away. But I mean, all my life I've had this memory of how that felt. And that was just, I didn't hurt her as badly as I thought I did. Just thinking for 5 minutes that I might have possibly killed somebody. It's the most horrific. Nothing else I've ever felt bad about doing in my life has felt as bad as I felt in those moments, right? So if you get drafted, it's not the same as volunteering for the military. There are people who volunteer for the military. They make peace with the fact that they may be required to kill somebody. They may be in a situation where they have to kill somebody who's trying to kill them. Their actions may support other people's deaths. It's what they're in the military for, right? But if you don't have that temperament where you can make peace with that, it's just not part of your personality to make peace with that, and you get drafted, the government doesn't say, do you consent to killing other people for your government? They don't say that. They tell you you're going to do it, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And if you don't agree, you're going to get court-martialed. You're going to get jailed. You could even be executed for being a traitor to the country if your refusal is big enough. Now, there are some exceptions, right? You can be a conscientious objector, and you have to prove that you have a very solid philosophy. It can't just be that you feel you would be very upset by having to engage in that kind of violence. It's a very limited, very serious thing to become a conscientious objector. And it doesn't get you out of service. It gets you out of fighting. So, for instance, during the Vietnam War, when my parents were in college, they went with, their university did a lot of charity work. And they went with a bunch of people to, it's no longer in operation, but Ypsilanti Mental Facility. The one that's famous because they put the 2 or 3 guys that thought they were Jesus in the same room together, just to see how they would react to each other. Because if one of them is Jesus, the other one can't also be Jesus, right? But they went as volunteers but there were a bunch of people on the bus with them that were going to do the same service that they went there to do as a religious pilgrimage kind of thing, missionary work. These other people were doing it because the government made them do it, because they were conscientious objectors. And like they come up with, you get shit duty. It's just your shit duty doesn't involve pointing a gun at another person, pulling the trigger, and watching them die.
Yeah.
You know. So this apex fallacy that we've seen playing, being proven by the Biden administration, where Turley talks about how big a proof it is that everything that Biden has said in his own defense in regard to his son's case is a lie. I want to point out first, before we talk about any other aspect of this, just, how much this proves that apex fallacy is a fallacy. That the guy at the top has an entirely different experience than the guy at the bottom. And it's not just a different experience. It's a level of power over the guy at the bottom that if you get an abusive guy at the top, the guys at the bottom have nothing they can do about it, until they get to vote. And if they're not all united against him, if he's not so blatantly bad that they're all united against him, he may remain in power. And because women don't always understand the abuses of the ruling class, the abuses of the elites against men, they don't always care enough to consider the experiences of men. Women may outvote men and keep an oligarch in power, or a totalitarian in power, or a totalitarian oligarch in power who abuses and exploits the common man the way the Biden family has done. So, beyond what Turley had to say. Oh, Lauren, did you have something?
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Beyond what Turley has to say, let's take a look at this pardon.
Can I just...
Yes.
I also agree with you.
Thank you. So this is CBS News. We don't necessarily trust CBS News, but I think this is pretty much just, a lot of it's just a word-for-word publication of the statements made by the president and the actual pardon itself. So those things we actually can at least confirm. So scroll down here, eliminate the video because we're not here to watch the video. And this is the part that really gets me, because usually when you have a presidential pardon, it's, I don't know, Bob Smith, like, sorry to everybody out there named Bob Smith. Bob Smith has been wrongly convicted of, I don't know, hogging the pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving. It's a really serious crime. And his punishment was disproportionate. Maybe he didn't actually hog the pie, or maybe there was another pie or whatever, and they're going to give him the death penalty for it. I'm going to pardon him. He's no longer culpable for hogging the pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, right? And that's it. Not everything he did at Thanksgiving or everything he did this whole decade.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden on Sunday issued a sweeping, full, and unconditional pardon of his son Hunter, who was convicted earlier this year of federal gun and drug charges, under laws, by the way, that his father wrote, which have been used against men in this country for 30 years. But that's supposedly beside the point, right? And pleaded guilty to federal tax charges in California. The pardon covers offenses that Hunter Biden has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1, 2014 through December 1, 2024.
So in other words, right before he went to go work for Burisma up until now.
Yeah.
And this was laid in place before the witching hour of December the 1st.
Yeah.
And many people were speculating, like, Hunter has a certain number of hours to do literally whatever he wants. And you have to wonder what he would do. You and I, like, dear listener, would do nothing because we couldn't conceive of the idea of murdering anyone on a moral level. Like, even if we could get away with it, we couldn't just simply murder someone just for the sake of we can get away with it. But you and I are not like Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is a man who has evidently been above the law for the last 10 years. And when he was given this federal permission to break literally any international law anywhere ever, I would love to be a fly on the wall in Hunter Biden's bedroom that night.
Yeah.
As he asked himself, I can literally get away with anything. What am I going to do? But in the end, he probably just smoked some crack and fucked a hooker and went to sleep. Because,
unless his father had a job for him to do.
Yeah.
Like, why else would he pick that specific date? Well, I'm going to have you do XYZ illegally. Like, maybe dispose of evidence that could be used against the Biden family in a criminal case or something like that. He couldn't be prosecuted for it because he's pardoned. And that's the situation. So we're going to look at the actual pardon. It's not even limited to offenses charged or prosecuted. So it's anything. Like anything he might have done. Stuff that if we don't even know about it yet and it comes out later, well, sorry, can't do anything about it now because he's
and if Hunter didn't commit a crime, then Joe didn't commit a crime either.
Well, I think that's what
how
Biden's
that works,
thinking.
isn't it?
I think that's what Biden's thinking, but it's not how it works in the real world. It's going to be interesting. So the pardon says, "Be it known that this day, I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States, pursuant to my powers under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, have granted unto Robert Hunter Biden a full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted," and then he gets real specific about those, and those have resulted in convictions. And then it says, in testimony whereof I have hereunto signed my name and caused the pardon to be recorded with the Department of Justice. So the one thing that he wasn't able to do with this pardon was prevent the state from jailing Hunter if he refuses to answer a subpoena later on to be compelled to testify against his father in any kind of criminal hearing. And if the testimony happens to be about something that happened during that 10-year period, what this does is, since Hunter's actions during the period, he could confess to mass murder. He could confess to going into a building full of people and being an active shooter and taking out half of them, and he wouldn't go to jail for it. Like, talk about midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Good grief, right?
Certainly
but
this can't...
Because of that, because he cannot incriminate himself, he cannot take the fifth on anything that happened during that time. Go on, Laura.
This cannot be the reason or the intention behind a presidential pardon.
No.
What? And just a get out of jail free card for anyone you want, And listen, I'm sorry, I'm still pissed that we couldn't get Julian Assange pardoned.
Yeah.
Okay, it's
so far.
Yes, so far we got one more shot.
Yeah. Well,
But,
and it's possible that we don't know who's going to be president after Trump. So it's possible that the mood of the country could be such that we would get more and more libertarian, maybe closer to ANCAP, and we might get somebody who will pardon Julian Assange because he did nothing wrong. I know there's a few people that are like, well, he went overboard on his criticism of the military. No, he didn't go far enough. And it's, in my opinion, there's quite a bit of information that has come out in the last, during the lifetime of most Gen Xers, that is so condemning of the way the federal government, particularly the federal bureaucracy, runs the military and uses the soldiers, that I absolutely, when it comes to that apex fallacy, I absolutely consider the draft to be human trafficking.
Like, why hasn't Elon Musk been subjected to the same lawfare as Julian Assange?
I think it's probably partly because he has more resources.
It's because Julian Assange discovered the nature of the Matrix before Elon Musk did.
Yeah.
The only reason that the legacy media loves Jeff Bezos and his takeover of the Washington Post, was it?
Yeah.
And yet they turn around and go, we can't possibly stand for Elon Musk's takeover of the Twitter network. Is because of the direction in which all of this narrative is being pushed.
Yeah.
And it's going to go the same for all of the other things in the near future that we've been talking about. And I had a big old rant to say about that singularity of conversation point that we were talking about just now, but I've forgotten what it was, so it doesn't matter. Someone take over. I'm drunk. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, these leftards have been crying about leaving Twitter before Elon ever got there.
Yeah.
Right, and they haven't left. They're still that. Well, I think now some of them are, but they still check in. They still look. They still read it because there's not enough interaction when you take a fraction of the people or the users on X/Twitter and shuffle them over to another place. Well, it's an echo chamber. They're just talking amongst themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like why Parler didn't really work and True Social didn't really work. Nobody wants to sit around and talk to people who are saying the exact same thing because at some point, you all know the arguments. You all know what everyone's going to say. You need a little something different to spice it up, right? These people are eternally online.
Yeah.
Well,
and they want drama.
Yeah.
They don't want to hash out ideas and may the best idea win. They just want drama.
No. Yeah. They want drama and they want to dictate to everyone else what they should and shouldn't do, how they should and shouldn't feel, what they can and can't say.
Yeah. Or
they're
they
like
want
hall monitors.
Outrage porn.
Yeah.
Outrage porn is a different ballgame from looking at major issues and things that are being done by the government, things that are happening in the news, and saying this is what needs to change, and here's who is proposing the best ideas, and we're going to support this guy because we think that the policy changes he is promising might actually fix the problem that this is exposing. And that's the arena of ideas, and it should be a mosh pit. Maybe a combination mosh pit and gladiator ring, right? Just a crossover. But outrage porn is just when you find some individual anecdotal example of something objectionable, and every single time something similar to that comes up, you have to freak out about each individual one. Each individual one deserves your full attention. Each individual one must be discussed at length, even though the discussion is going to lead to absolutely nothing. And it's fair to compile outrage porn and make note of the fact, gosh, this happens very frequently, and maybe try to use it to change the position of the Overton window. But that's not what snowflakes on the left do. It's not what snowflakes on the right do either. Like you have activists that are trying to get people to understand what the problems are and what policy changes or eliminations need to happen to fix it. But you also have people that just want to stir shit and just want to initiate cancellation mobs, and that's it. That's all they want. So somebody gets yelled at, and somebody gets maybe fired from their job or debanked or other consequences like that because they said the wrong set of words or even the wrong one word. I got limited on X last night for explaining, not for using the word faggot as a slur, but for explaining that it is not always used as a reference to homosexuality, that it has other uses, and that if you look at the old school knockdown drag out internet, like the heyday of 4chan, the days when there was no such thing as a blog, the days when like back to Usenet days, even the AOL chat rooms that were so insulated and everything because you only used them if you were sort of stuck in the little circle of AOL and didn't leave. There was none of this, oh, you can't say that word, those are nasty words, those are hurty words, we're going to kick you out. It was like the way cunt gets used in Australia. You faggots get over here, and it means everybody. It's really sad and pathetic that we've gotten to the point where we're empowering language to be hurty words again that we had disempowered by pretty much applying it to everything and making it meaningless. Why would you do that? You give mean people weapons that they don't deserve and they don't have a right to, and you don't have to allow them to be weapons in other people's hands. But somebody got very butthurt that I corrected the hysteria that was being engaged in, and it wasn't even one of the people I was explaining it to. It was somebody else watching the conversation, and I actually think it was a news outlet that we were criticizing for some behaviors that were really shitty. So yeah, it's quite interesting that we're sort of returning to that snowflakery, and it makes it very difficult for conversations to happen. And that outrage porn tendency to ignore persuading people to change their minds about the gap between the way things are and the way they should be, and abandoning that in favor of getting upset and getting other people upset and stopping at we're upset, that's really starting to bother me. This is like this. A lot of people stopped at, it's so unfair that Hunter Biden got pardoned. Which, we can acknowledge that. Yes, it is unfair. But that's not the biggest problem with it, right? That opens a door, that unfairness opens a door to examine several things that are much more important than whether or not it's fair. One of which is...
like Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, well, even that. Like, yes, I will be livid if Anthony Fauci gets pardoned. But it's not the unfairness of it that is the problem, right? It's the fact that an apex person, a person in the elite, can commit horrible crimes with the full knowledge that he doesn't have to worry about accountability because he is in a set of elites that are in power that can protect him from being held accountable for his actions in the future when they are about to leave power. That is a major issue. If you don't have accountability in government, you don't have anything even remotely resembling a democracy. It's totalitarian. If your government officials can engage in profoundly deadly, evil violations of human rights that cause damage across the entire population, that damage the economy, that damage the development of an entire generation of children. Because Gen Alpha is going to suffer from the things that happened to them during the COVID crisis as a result of policy, direct result of policy that Fauci put into action by advising Biden what to do, right? And if he can get away with that, that means another person can do it, and another, and another.
Yeah.
Right? That you can take the hits over and over again from government officials not caring about the effect of their policy on you. And to me, that is probably one of the best ANCAP arguments I can make. As long as the government is able to exempt itself and its denizens, its participants, whatever, from accountability for things that impact broad swatches of the population, that impact the economy, that change how the future is going to go, it's probably the most dangerous thing in existence. It's more dangerous to have government than it is to have nuclear bombs out there in a government-free world.
And yeah, I've found myself at this crossroads of how authoritarian should we be and how libertarian should we be when it comes to the average person, when it comes to the likes of Anthony Fauci. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the worst that could happen if we enact the most authoritarian measures on Anthony Fauci? We'll not only arrest him, we'll incarcerate him, and we might even torture him. I mean,
I would.
it's not. Lauren just yelled, "I would," from the other room. And yes, I would, because, I mean, we've been enacting torture for the last few decades, largely for the sake of war. And that's certainly a controversial way to approach things. A lot of us would like to say we probably shouldn't torture people. I mean, unless we're in a situation where we can get some extremely important information. And I would quite like to get Anthony Fauci into a position where we can get some important information from him. This is what I'm talking about this line between authoritarian and libertarianism. I like to think I lean against whatever force might involve torturing people for information. But I think we've reached the point where we've found the last generation of evil bastards that we can legitimately and laudably justify using torture against.
No.
Because I don't know. I don't know how it's even theoretically possible to have government-appointed evil bastards any more evil than Anthony Fauci. And there's all sorts of things swirling around in my head that I want to say right now, but I can't say any of them because I'm pretty sure it would get this channel deleted if I said any of those things. So, yeah,
And you might get a talking to from TSA again.
There was 30 minutes in my head of rant just now, but I'm just gonna have to leave it there. But I think I've said my thing.
So
I think
probably
I think I've tickled your senses, dear listeners, as to what you want to say.
Yeah, probably Mike cannot get away with comparing Dr. Anthony Fauci to Joseph Mengele, for instance. But I can. He certainly experimented on more people than Mengele. He kind of experimented on the entire world. There were a lot of places where policy that he influenced made vaccines whose creation he influenced and was invested in mandatory. And I agree that they're not real vaccines. Like that's something that there were other things. Then there's a lot of information that has come out about those drugs.
I mean, for Christ's sake, India yeeted Fauci from their entire country.
Yeah.
And these are the same people who shit in the street. Okay?
Yeah.
If
they know better, the rest of us, really ought to be rejecting the man.
Anthony Fauci is a wanted man in Japan, and they are the opposite of people who shit in the street.
Yes.
You have to shit in a robot in Japan.
But they are very polite, and for them to get that irate about one guy, that says something too. Especially like, I would never set foot there if I was him. There's a very stark division between two segments of the Japanese population, and so there's the ones that you meet if you're your average tourist, and then there's the ones that you meet if you're a dumbass. And I wouldn't want to meet the ones that Anthony Fauci was most likely to meet if he goes there. We'll just put it that way. And I suppose it's that way in every country that's known for being maybe a little more socially enlightened. But I definitely would not want the experience he would have if he shows up there. They are mad. They are really mad. And they have every right to be.
And for some reason, the rest of the world is just not paying attention or not talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
just depending on which country. Some of them can't,
Right. But I mean, we here where we have access to this information and we have the ability to speak about it, why aren't there more people saying this and pointing it out? Yeah. Vehemently. It's just beyond me. And I think the problem is that the news cycle runs so fast, right? Like, people are done talking about COVID because, we're past it now, and Trump's in office. Yay! We have something excited to be about.
Yeah.
To be excited about.
We're not past it, actually.
We're not. We are not.
Depending on your profession.
It's like how South Korea is facing all these problems.
Yeah.
That have obviously been caused by feminism.
Mm.
Like, people saying, South Korea's been taken over by incels. No, it's been taken over by people who are sick to their back teeth of all the feminism. Mm. And that's and this reflects what's been going on in the West. And this results in different apocalyptic probabilities in different areas of the world, and what's happening in the West is happening in the East in the same way, but in a slightly different trajectory.
Yeah.
I think is the right word. And the 4B movement, they say, originated in South Korea. Pardon. But it was always an adaptation of what was already going on in Europe. The same as in Japan. Grass eaters came before MGTOW, but there was already a precursor to MGTOW that took place before grass eaters.
There always has been. There have always been, clear back during like medieval days, there have always been men who figured out that gynocentrism created a huge social scam around male-female relationships, and they wanted no part of it. That's been a thing for as long as, I'm pretty sure it's been a thing for as long as marriage has been an institution rather than a sort of a default status that existed because humans pair bond for life normally. But yeah, in any case, with regard to Fauci, and he hasn't done it yet. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. If he does, it just reinforces everything we've said here. And Biden's excuses are pathetic. Like, truly, truly pathetic. I want to remind you that there have been numerous cases across the country during the last 30 years where men have been convicted of owning guns after being busted for smoking a joint, or having one hit of a drug, or having a couple of pills, anything that they don't even have to have the gun with them. We talked about one on Tuesday, that he was suspected of a crime he didn't commit, so the cops arrested him and questioned him. They found a joint on him, and they convicted him for owning a gun that he hadn't brought with him, that was at home in another state. So the gun not only wasn't used in a crime, the crime, by the way, was not a crime. The suspected crime was murder. A woman had actually killed herself with her own gun, later to be proved, because it's they were able to match the bullets to that gun. But this guy still ended up with a conviction because he had a joint and he was a gun owner. He had a joint in Florida, and he had a gun in, I think it was Georgia. Just completely ridiculous. There are tons of cases like that where somebody gets busted because they got high once, or they get busted because they're in a car where drugs are found, and maybe they're riding with somebody that had drugs, or that they get busted because they were trying to buy drugs, and they have a gun somewhere else, or they've got a gun in their car, or they legally own a gun and they hadn't committed a drug crime when they purchased the gun. The actual crime that Hunter Biden committed was lying about his drug use on a form when he applied for gun ownership. And so he willfully broke the law. It wasn't a law that... And there have been people that have been gun owners, that were gun owners before that law was passed, that were busted for violating it because they didn't change their lifestyle after the law was passed. Right? But Biden's statement is, let's see, I'm going to sneak past the beginning because it doesn't matter. He claims he kept his word, which is bullshit. So he claims to have watched his son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted, right? Which we know is not true because this is pretty typical use of that law. He says, without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. And like, I don't believe that. The almost never bit, that's bullshit. And the way he states that, it's like, he gave the wrong hair color or something. He literally concealed a crime that he was committing by buying the gun in the first place when he lied about his drug use. Because if he had admitted to his drug use, the reason he lied about it was because if he admitted it, he knew the gun seller wouldn't legally be allowed to sell him the gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like if you...
Oh, but Hannah, there's loopholes.
Yeah.
Fucking idiots.
Well, if you wanted one today, you could just get a 3D printer. But that's going to change a lot of things because it's going to be it's a lot harder to... it's not that they can't do it, but it's a lot harder to prevent people from 3D printing their own guns and using them.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're calling them ghost guns for a reason. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine who he used to be a guard in a juvenile detention facility, and now he is he wanted to actually be able to do something for the juveniles instead of just managing them. And so now he is a probation officer for juvenile offenders who are trying to improve their situation.
I actually have a friend who just started a new job doing that very same thing. And I can't imagine just the amount of troubled kids that you come across. And
well, it's a different situation today.
Yeah.
What you're rescuing kids from, like what you were rescuing kids from in the 80s and the 90s that were in that situation, was life circumstances that may have stunted their development a little bit. But what you're rescuing them from today, when you're trying to help them through the pathway of reform after they've done something that's landed them in juvie, like you're rescuing some of those kids from bizarre life circumstances, from circumstances that don't just stunt your development but warp it and send it down a trajectory that is incredibly wrong. And the worst part is, he's also dealing with the fact that a rather large percentage of boys that come out of juvie and go into probation, they're not just coming from single mother homes where they, grew up without learning the ropes of becoming an adult and all that. They're not just coming out of gang neighborhoods where they learned that you have to use violence one way or another because if you don't, you're going to find it used against you. They're not just facing those kind of problems. They've been molested by the female staff at the juvenile detention facility, and so he's not just he's dealing with kids who have had trauma that is mind altering to a degree that it increases their recidivism. It warps their ability to have normal relationships with other people. It damages them in ways that aren't fully understood. It causes them to be anywhere from, twice as likely to 44 times as likely to engage in substance abuse, can make them up to 14 times more likely to commit suicide. And in that environment, he's also got tech-savvy kids who know how to use 3D printers, and some have access to them. And like we were talking about, like, ghost guns are going to change the game entirely for law enforcement, because they're not illegal, and even if they were illegal, there's not a way that they can fully stop people from creating them.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that is the least available in today's family and social environment that Art Force just mentioned, male role models,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's going to be the most important thing going forward. Because if there's no way to totally cut off the supply of something like that, then the only other pathway that you have is to reform the way that children are raised so that they will not misuse those things, because they're gonna have them as they get older. Right? So instead of trying to micromanage the people, they should support the people's best pathway to child rearing and human development. But in any case, yeah, all of that said, what Biden was saying here was a bald-faced lie. It's not clear that Hunter was treated differently. He was treated exactly like everybody else, and that's why Biden pardoned him. So when he says, "No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son," that's bullshit.
Hold my beer, bitch.
He was not singled out only because he was Biden's son. He was pardoned only because he was at the apex.
Exactly. There's no other excuse for it. There's no other reason. There's no other explanation.
Now, here's when I'm expecting to hear some outrage here. I'm going to skip to the last paragraph. Right. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth.
Oh, is that what he's been doing for the past? How many years has he been in government? 40?
His whole life.
Yes.
He has never, to my knowledge, he has never held a job that wasn't as a public official.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he started out as a prosecutor. I don't know if he did anything in law before being a prosecutor. He maybe worked for a firm or something, but obviously not very long, because he was pretty young when he got into politics.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just insane for him to say that. Just tell the American people the truth. My God, man. He's obviously got Alzheimer's if he thinks people aren't going to remember all of the lies that he has told.
Well, see, but that's the thing. The people who support him do not care about the truth. They will look the truth smack dab in the face and say, "Oh yeah, but anyway, Orange Man is bad." And
they have Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It's because they don't believe in the truth. Anybody that uses the words "my truth" when they are talking about truth as, if they're talking about truth as something that yours can be different from theirs, anybody that says that, they're bullshitting you. All right?
Yeah.
Like, it's, if I describe the way gravity works accurately in the environment in which we are currently, I say, yep, we are on Earth, and on Earth gravity works this way, and here's where the variations are in, if you're in this particular type of topography, if you're this far above sea level versus that far above sea level, and how little those variations are, and so on. But, with my specificity and everything, this is what it is. This is how we experience gravity right here, right? That is not my truth. That is the truth. It is fact. And it is truth. And if somebody wants to argue that it's not truth because gravity is different on the moon, well, bullshit. We're not talking about the moon. We're talking about Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about men, darling. But honestly, when I hear the phrase, my truth, it puts me into a mentality of automatically not believing whatever follows it. So I hate when people adopt the phrase where they're saying, I'm going to tell the things I know, the things I've seen, and I'm going to witness, and they say my truth. No, just say the truth. But when somebody like Joe Biden perverts the phrase, tell the truth, when him saying, here, I'm telling the truth, is a lie, it's just offensive because of that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what... He doesn't know what truth is.
No.
He thinks if he says something, that makes it true.
Mm-hmm. He's spitting in your faces. He's spitting in all of our faces. That's all it is, you know?
And he can, because he's at the apex.
Yeah. What the hell is anybody going to do, you know, at this point? So...
Well, and it's... If you do it, or I do it, if the man down the street from me does it, he gets no benefit, and he might get smacked down for it by, you know, whatever authority he's dealing with at the time. But Joe Biden can do it when he is a lame duck outgoing president who just pardoned his own son for a crime that he caused hundreds of other people to be jailed for during his career in politics. You know, it's bullshit, and it is an immense abuse of your tolerance, and that tolerance is kind of forced. We can't, like, we can turn around and say we don't believe him, we can vote him out of office, but we can't do anything about this. He's going to do this, and he's going to lie about it, and he's going to expect to be believed, and he's going to be satisfied, basically, that you know, he has fooled everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That pisses me off. So, but that's not why we're discussing this, right? So we got through that. We're going to look at Trump cites Hunter Biden pardon in motion to dismiss New York criminal case. And this is the thing. If my son does something he shouldn't do, and I have a way of keeping him from being held accountable for it, the impact on that is not nearly as much, right? People who hate Trump, he's using the Hunter Biden pardon as a possible means of getting a case you were hoping would take him down dismissed. That should bother you. Those of us who don't hate him, those of us who support him, you know, it still creates a bad taste for me. Not because I think that the case is legitimate, but how else is that going to be used? You know, if Hunter Biden's pardon results in a dismissal of this case. So I'm going to take a look here at this article with you guys. Donald Trump's lawyers pointed to an unlikely person in demanding a judge dismiss the president-elect's New York criminal case, Hunter Biden. Trump's attorneys said in a court filing made public Tuesday that President Joe Biden's controversial pardon of his son echoed Trump's complaints about the prosecution. Yesterday, in issuing a 10-year pardon to Hunter Biden that covers any and all crimes, whether charged or uncharged, President Biden asserted that his son was selectively and unfairly prosecuted and treated differently, they wrote, before claiming Trump was treated similarly. In the filing, which was submitted Monday night, they formally demanded a New York judge throw out a president-elect's criminal case, or the president-elect's criminal case, and nullify a unanimous jury's conclusion that Trump committed dozens of felonies. Their argument struck at the quality of the case against Trump, but centers largely on a wholly unique argument in the history of America's legal system. Trump's lawyers said his conviction in state court should not stand because he was elected president after his conviction. Prosecutors for Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg have vowed to oppose the dismissal motion and have given a 1-week deadline to file their response. They have been given a 1-week deadline. They pursued the case amid a torrent of public threats of retribution by Trump's allies and anonymous threats of violence by his supporters. So remember, this is CBS News, so this is their bias is anti-Trump. So they're going to call accountability threats of retribution. Right? If you break the law in the course of this, we're going to apply the law to you, is a threat of retribution when it's made against somebody doing something unnecessarily bad to somebody that they hate, right? So my big thing with this is, if this is how Trump gets this stuff overturned, instead of proving that the case was bad and he was innocent, it sets a precedent that a person at the apex, a person who is in office, can manipulate the system just by saying, well, you're targeting me because I'm in office. This was a political prosecution, and get it dismissed that way. And I personally, my preference would be to see it happen the other way around, where it is proved in court that the case was never valid, and that proof is used to bolster and support the point that, hey, this prosecution was targeted because, I was the political opposition. Like, it's being done backwards. And it's probably got a chance of working, because if it didn't have any chance at all of working, these attorneys wouldn't be doing it. The other thing is, I'm not sure the story is accurate talking about the convictions, but in any case...
Are you sharing your screen?
Yes, I was. Did it stop?
Yeah.
It looks like it did. Damn it. Alright, well, I'll bring it back up. Come on. Okay, there it is. I think that's the right page. Let me go back. It comes up really tiny. Yeah, that's the right thing. Okay. So I'm looking at something that is the size of a 35mm negative on my screen. When to see if I've got the right screen. And there's other things, like my OBS and some other things that are up, our Discord. But that's the correct one. So yeah, if you look at this, it's created an argument that's being used in court right now, that could in the future be used by corrupt politicians as a get out of accountability free card, if it works. And even though it isn't actually being used to cover up corruption this time, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. What matters is what's it going to make possible in the future. Now, there's always the argument that if this is the most likely thing to work, it's better to protect the presidency. But if you're going to do that, then hell, you might as well just acquit anybody that gets elected. So, yeah, I don't know. This bothers me immensely. And it's not something where I'm like, oh, I'm angry at Trump for doing this. I'm angry that it became a possibility. I haven't gotten to the
Yeah.
point of being angry at Trump for doing it yet. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe there's something he knows that I don't, but I have the potential to become angry at Trump for doing this instead of going the route of contesting all of the flaws in the case and taking it beyond the level where it is currently in order to get it overturned for more legitimate reasons. There we go. I keep getting hidden behind Discord here. So this is more about the postponement of sentencing. After Trump won the presidency on November 5, his attorneys quickly indicated they'd make Monday's request. In Trump's filing, his attorneys referred to his election victory as overwhelming. Bragg's office has floated postponing sentencing and other proceedings until after Trump's term in office, which ends in 2029. Consideration must be given to various non-dismissal options that may address any concerns raised by the presidency or the pendency of a post-trial criminal proceeding during the presidency, such as deferral of all remaining criminal proceedings until after the end of the defendant's upcoming presidential term, they wrote in a November 19 letter to Merchant. So it's all unprecedented and all that. They can complain about that all they like. But I think what's really going on here is Bragg's office is trying to find a way to avoid having their case any further analyzed by any higher level judges. Trump wants to be free of it because he wants to focus on more important things. And unfortunately, Biden just gave him a shortcut that is all too tempting and, in my opinion, potentially damaging. It's like Mother's Little Helper. Yeah, it works great the first couple times you use it, and then all of a sudden it's addicted and you're abusing it. It's not a good thing. So from there we go to India. India actually explained the Hunter Biden story pretty succinctly, and we probably need to look at it a little bit just because not everybody is up to speed on everything that's happened here. So, from laptop to pardon, the Hunter Biden story explained. It's a lot of times this kind of information on something that happened or is happening in the United States, you got to get it from an external source because our news media, they're not being honest about it. So we'll give it a bit of a rundown here. I'm going to maybe have to widen this. I don't know how. Nope, it's still going to be like right up against the edge. Sorry guys, I don't know if it's cut off on. It is a little bit cut off on
a little bit
right
on the
up
left
the
side.
edge. That's
yeah.
really annoying. I wish that wouldn't happen, but oh well. The Hunter Biden story has been a roller coaster of allegations, revelations, political controversies, culminating in an unprecedented presidential pardon. What began as a dismissed fake laptop conspiracy in the heat of the 2020 election has evolved into a significant chapter in American political history. This narrative weaves together allegations of influence peddling, media suppression, legal battles, and family loyalty, ending with President Joe Biden's December 1st, 2024 decision to issue a full and unconditional pardon to his son, Hunter Biden. Here's the full story from its contentious origins to its dramatic conclusion. So the first bit goes over just weeks before the 2020 election, the New York Post published an explosive story claiming that a laptop allegedly belonging to Hunter Biden had been abandoned at a Delaware repair shop. The laptop purportedly contained emails, documents, and personal materials suggesting Hunter had engaged in questionable business dealings abroad, including with Ukrainian and Chinese entities. One email in particular referenced a proposed equity split in a deal with Chinese company, mentioning 10 held by H for the big guy. Critics speculated that the big guy was Joe Biden, then the Democratic presidential nominee. These allegations, if true, implied potential conflicts of interest and influence peddling involving the Biden family. The dismissal of the story is fake. And this was kind of fun because it didn't take very long for it to get debunked. At the time, the Biden campaign and allied Democrats vehemently denied the laptop's authenticity, labeling it a Russian disinformation campaign. So, just for purposes of the men's rights movement understanding, you look at the American Democrat Party, and this is especially for MRAs outside the United States, because you're getting a different narrative a lot of times than everybody else in the United States. But anytime you hear American news labeled a Russian disinformation campaign, that is Democrat code for thing that we don't want people talking about. It has absolutely nothing to do with Russia. It's not disinformation. It is something that goes against whatever narrative the Democrat Party has that they want to maintain, or creates conflict over some policy or procedure that the Democrat Party politicians are engaged in. And so rather than confronting things on their merits with their interests on their merits, they cry Russian disinformation. It is essentially Democrat politics equivalent of feminists crying misogyny every time you say something they don't like. So, let's see. It goes through there were 51 former intelligence officials, so people who had retired, people who had quit, people who had been fired for whatever reason. Like anybody could be in that list. Who wrote that the story had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. And we're talking, when they say intelligence officials, American spies, CIA agents, FBI agents said, government bureaucrats basically said, don't believe that. It's Russian disinformation. Don't believe the white curtain being drawn aside and exposing the little guy behind the curtain. Believe the establishment that we're part of. It's all fake news. During an October 2020 debate, Biden himself referred to the laptop allegations as part of a Russian plan, asserting there are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. Then social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook took extraordinary measures to limit the story's reach. They hid it. They banned people from posting it.
Mm-hmm.
The Twitter suspended the New York Post account. They're the ones that broke the story.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then they held strong. They
Yep.
wouldn't take down the tweet. I don't know if that sense has changed, because I'm sure they're back. But yeah, I definitely vividly remember that. I thought it was a bold move.
And they lied about why. They said it was for violating their hacked materials policies, even though there was no hacking taking place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And now I don't remember where I heard it, but I distinctly remember people talking about there being more than one laptop.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there were all kinds of narratives bandied about. Well, that's not the real laptop. He has the real laptop. That's a fake laptop. There were a bunch of things. I remember that too. Right? So then, next thing that happens, boom, after the election, which people did speculate that it was influenced by the claim that the laptop was Russian disinformation. There were people that voted on the idea that the Trump campaign tried a supposed second time to use Russian disinformation to manipulate an election, even though there was no first time, and it was proved that there was no first time. They the news media still runs with that narrative, and they just added this to it, right? So after the election, investigations by independent outlets, including the New York Times and the Washington Post, who wanted very badly to debunk the laptop as being a real thing, proved that it was confirmed the authenticity of key materials from the laptop. Critics of the initial suppression argued that these revelations validated earlier concerns and exposed systemic bias in how the media handled politically sensitive stories. So everybody that voted for Joe Biden during the 2020 election because they thought that the Trump campaign tried to use Russian disinformation to steal the election because that is what the Biden administration told them, basically got lied to. What is this? Oh, thank you, spyware. I really don't want to do that right now. All right. Back to India. Spyware is mad because I haven't updated not spyware, but super anti-spyware is mad because I haven't updated in like 2 weeks, and I usually do it much more frequently than that. So there you go. And I haven't shut off the thing where it suggests that I should update and then opens a tab. So fun. Anyway, so here we are. It comes out. Hey, this was real. They lied. It wasn't Russian disinformation. Oh, by the way, check this rug out. We're going to sweep it all under there. Nobody apologized. Nobody came out and said, oh, gosh, all of those officials that stated that it was Russian disinformation were wrong, or did they lie? Nobody came out and did that, except a few people asking questions in the alternative media, not the establishment media. Except, I guess Tucker Carlson did bring it up. He brought up, who are these guys that made this claim, that just came out of the woodwork to make this claim in order to manipulate the election? Are they really former intelligence officials, or are they still on the payroll? Is their cover feigned retirement, feigned firing, feigned job changes, right? Nobody else really said anything about it. Nobody in the mainstream media, anyway. Only Tucker Carlson. I really didn't see anybody else discussing that. Let's see. And, of course, Glenn Greenwald pointed out that social media moguls, everybody tried to suppress the story. Tech sectors, so on. It wasn't just censorship, it was narrative control. And there was a whole machine. Literally every institution, every major institution in the United States conspired to hide the truth from you during the 2020 election. That was scary to find out, right? Then we have the legal charges, the legal troubles. So the laptop had an actual, I don't know what to call it, a mob, a population. Like, it had a bushel of things that he could have been charged with. He was charged with tax violations and gun charges. There were so many things on there that he could have been charged over.
Like he got the easiest. He got the easiest road that anybody could have given. Oh my God, it's just, and I mean, but I guess, to prove other things, there would have to be more of an investigation, and I just, they just don't seem too gung ho in trying to actually do anything about it. But
well, and a difficult thing is, the people who have seen what's on that laptop that are talking about what's on that laptop are all, like, anybody who is anti-Trump will dismiss their witness testimony as pro-Trump and therefore not believable, right? But the fact is that it's been pretty consistent that people who have seen it have indicated that there was evidence of crimes against children on that laptop. So being just charged for a tax violation,
Yes.
like, and unrelated
Slap
to
on
the
the
device,
wrist.
yeah. So, in order to avoid a long drawn-out trial, he initially reached a plea deal with the prosecutors. The judge felt that the plea deal was overly lenient. Quite likely the prosecutors were pressured into that by the Biden administration. Because, one of the scandals that came out during the election was the Burisma scandal in Ukraine, where Biden was employed by a company that was under investigation for some sort of fraud or other corruption. The investigation included investigating Hunter Biden's actual work in that company. And Joe Biden leveraged public aid to Ukraine during the Obama administration when he was vice president to get that prosecutor thrown out of office to stop the investigation of his son. So, yeah, I wonder how the prosecutors here in the United States were inspired to give him such a great deal that the judge was like, you're being too lenient. I wonder how that happened.
I want to know, but it's just going to point the finger at more people that I'm going to be pissed off with and want to yeet from the society. So,
Yep.
ooh.
You think about that. Let's compare this to a case that was like one of the first major cases I became aware of that, I knew cases locally that were people that I knew that had been hit with false allegations and were pressured by the system. I had one friend that was convicted when the Violence Against Women Act was new because a woman saying that she was afraid of a man was enough to cause him to be guilty of domestic violence. And then, I had another friend who was convicted because no matter what a woman is trying to do to a man violently, he's supposed to still be gentle with her. So he fought too hard when he defended himself against her second attempt at stabbing him in the throat with a sharp object, and therefore the judge found him guilty of assaulting her. Right, so I saw cases like that, right? But Brian Banks, that one really pissed me off because here was a young man who was an athlete who was on a trajectory that could have placed him. This kid could have been a rich guy by today because of his sports career.
Had everything going for him, everything. And some lying bitch comes in and ruins it all.
Right?
Oh my God.
And the thing that nailed him wasn't evidence or even bias in the jury or the judge. The prosecutor got him alone without his mom, and if I understand right, without his lawyer, and browbeat him into signing a plea deal out of fear of a longer sentence if he fought the case. And in reality, that fear is valid because if a man is offered a plea deal in a case like that and he doesn't take it and he fights the case and then he's found guilty, he does get a harsher sentence So, like judges do have that bias. If you exercise your right to defend yourself against a charge, you get punished with something closer to the maximum sentence for what you were charged with. And that happened to young men all over the United States, right? This one just happened to be innocent. Brian Banks didn't do anything to that girl. And she admitted it later on camera, and that was his saving grace, but it was too late. He'd been in for 5 years, and his chance was gone.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get those 5 years of your life back.
Yeah.
You know, and was there any kind of restitution for him on his side?
There
after
was
this
some,
issue?
but there's never enough. There's never enough. I've watched, like, the Innocence Project has had a lot of men that they have gotten out of imprisonment and other punishments because of false allegations, that they've either pled guilty to or been found guilty of wrongfully on false evidence or other things. And the awards that they get from the states vary dramatically, but there's not enough money in the universe to pay for stealing 5 years of somebody's life. And sometimes it's 38 years. There's a guy on their website, whose story is on their website, who was wrongly imprisoned for 38 years. 30 years is a full career in a job. And he was imprisoned for longer than you would be at your job if you had a full career at your job, from hiring to retirement. Right? They took his whole life. They took his whole adult life.
Yeah, that's just unacceptable. It doesn't even begin to.
Right?
And Brian Banks, like I was gonna say before you even brought this man up, I was gonna say how they didn't just take the 5 years; they took his career.
Right. They took his whole life.
Effectively, the rest of his life. He's going to have to pick up the pieces, and it's going to take an employer that has any kind of wits about them, any kind of wherewithal to care enough to look into the situation, because that's not something that you just hide, right? On a job application, right?
Well,
it
he's
doesn't
famous
just
for
go
it,
away.
so it helps him that he's famous for being innocent. And I think he's a motivational speaker now. But the thing is, this happens to a lot of men, where there in the 90s there was an issue of men being convicted of sex crimes because an expert identified their hair as being the same as hair that was found on the victim. And about 25% of cases that were later reevaluated using DNA testing found that no, actually that was not their hair. 1 in 4 turned out to be at least a wrong identification. Even if it wasn't, the crime didn't happen. The allegation against the convicted was false. That man didn't commit the crime. So from his experience, it's still a false allegation, right?
Right.
And a lot of these men get confronted with stuff like that. Well, we have your hair on the victim, and it's like, how could you possibly? Well, the expert says it's your hair. You can't contest that, right? There's nothing that you can say to prove that wrong. So they get pressured into these plea deals. All right, I'll agree to plead guilty to this crime if you don't give me the maximum sentence. But they still lose their whole lives.
I mean, you can walk past a person in a grocery store and leave your hair on them. Like, that's how easy it is. You know what I mean? If you just simply touch someone, you can leave skin cells.
You could take the hair of 4 or 5 different people from my family and put them all in the same area, like a single strand in the same area, and one of the hair identification experts from the 90s would think they were all from the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And without DNA testing, you wouldn't realize, oh, these people might all be related, but they're not the same person. And there are people that I know, that I'm friends with, that could put their hair right next to my hair. And the hair expert, the identification expert, would think it was from the same person. And we are not biologically related at all.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't even have the same national backgrounds. So, you know,
I mean, the scary thing for me is when you think about, like, in the past. I mean, I guess it's not so scary anymore because we do have DNA evidence. But before we had DNA evidence, hair follicles were like, that was their big thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Their smoking gun. It's your hair. It looks exactly like your hair, so it must be your hair. And it turns out that actually a lot of people's hair looks alike.
Yeah.
You know, much more alike than people would think. And then the other thing is, you could take hair from different spots on my head and put them side by side, little strands of hair, and think they were all from different people.
Mm.
In fact, some of them you could assume were from people of a different racial background than you would call me if you looked at me.
Yeah.
And I have, like, I don't have to dye my hair to have quote unquote unnatural hair colors. I have some brown hair, I have some black hair, I have some red hair, I have some blonde hair. Very few, but they're in there. I've found them before. And I have a lot of silver hair now too, so I'm rich.
Same.
I got silver on my head. Got a lot on my head. But yeah, you could try to identify me by my hair and fail miserably. Right? So there you go. But these guys, because they are commoners, they're not at the apex. They're not the men whose father has the power of the state to use against a prosecutor to strong-arm him into being supposedly fair or favoring, you know, his son. They get strong-armed. They get run over. They get their due process rights violated. They get them violated so badly that there's organizations out there dedicated solely to the practice of helping people who have been wrongly convicted get their sentences overturned based on solid evidence that they shouldn't have been convicted in the first place. Right? Because the way that they were convicted was based on bad science. And they don't have a dad who can pardon them. They don't have a dad who can withhold federal aid to a foreign country to get a prosecutor dismissed so they won't be investigated. Right? They don't even have a dad who can go in and say, we're gonna sue you if you discriminate against my son.
They're lucky if they have any dad.
Right? There's a lot of them, right, that have no dad. There's a lot of them that their dad couldn't file a lawsuit because he's broke. He doesn't have any money.
Yep.
Right. And then there's a lot of them that, because their dad's a commoner, even if he did file a lawsuit, the state would just run him over too. Apex fallacy. Biden being able to do this, and we're going to hear it from feminists. Well, look, Hunter Biden committed all these crimes and his father just pardoned him. Patriarchy. You benefit from it. Oh yeah? How? How did Brian Banks benefit from Joe Biden being able to pardon his son? Then it gets on and it explains the pardon. So we already know that part. Right? So, next week when we come back. We're going to get into this article. This is Sky News in Australia. It's interesting. There seems to be some good and some bad that comes out of there. But this article it is interesting just in where it leads. So we'll read through a little bit of this article on the laptop from hell and the corruption story that it exposes, and why might, if all Hunter Biden ever did wrong was have a gun while he was an addict and not pay taxes and then have to pay them back later. If that's all he ever did wrong, why did he need a 10-year pardon? Why did it have to be a blanket pardon for things that he may have done during that time? All right. This is going to answer some of those questions. We start with this, and it will take us, oh, come on, open sesame, to this report. This report is the Marco Polo report on what was found on the Hunter Biden laptop. And as you can see here on the table of contents, we have business-related crimes, sex-related crimes, drug-related crimes, influence peddling, legal accountability, and then conclusion and endnotes. So there's quite a bit there to look at. So now you know where we're going next week. Next week we are going to Burisma. And I'm laughing, but it's not happy laughter. I'm really pissed about this because and I knew it was going to happen too. Like when people were like, "Well, Biden said he's not going to pardon his son." Yeah, you knew he was a snake when you picked him up, right?
Right.
I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
So
I've
been ready for this.
It feels like, at least for me personally, I'm just in a period where the only way that my brain knows how to handle the garbage, the influx of bullshit, is to make the darkest jokes about it, right?
Yeah.
And try to laugh, because anything else just doesn't compute. You know what I mean? Like
that's a part of trauma recovery.
Yeah, and that's where I am. I have to make jokes about this crap because it's too bleak to look right in the face and deal with. And for me, the problem is that I'm very doubtful that anything is going to happen. I'm so glad that Trump has been reelected for the third time. And I would really love to see something be done.
Yeah.
But I just I'm out of hope. I'm out of hope.
Yeah. And if Joe Biden's pardon for his son stands, which it probably will, that's not going to be my concern. It's not that I'm not going to be upset about it, but I'm not going to be focused on that. What I want to see is the current administration, or the administration that follows up from the current administration, depending on how long it takes to get this achieved, make changes to the pardon power of the president that would act as checks and balances to this type of corruption. Because this is a situation, and we're going to see this in the next episode when we talk next week about more of this, where a corrupt politician with a lifelong habit of exploiting his office to lean on members of the public for essentially mafia insurance type payments. And that includes oligarchs in other countries when he got into national politics. So we don't know how long, how many people he did that to when he was a small-time politician. But we know who he did it to when he was a big-time politician. And you don't get there without having a lifetime habit of that, right? He has used the presidential pardon powers to try to cover his tracks and prevent himself from being held accountable for his corruption. Like, there has to be some checks and balances on that power that prevents that. Even if he can pardon anyone he wants to, anywhere he wants to in the country, there has to be some degree of accountability or some limitation that does not allow the President of the United States to use his pardon powers to cover his tracks for crimes that he has potentially committed. Like, if he's accused of or suspected of. It's just insane that it can happen.
Yeah.
You know, the left would never tolerate that if Donald Trump could do it, and they found that Donald Trump was going to do it, right? Even if he pardoned people in his administration, or when he pardoned people in his administration, they got mad, right?
Yeah.
If he pardoned, if he had a deal going like Joe Biden and Hunter Biden had with Ukraine, and his son did for him what Hunter Biden did for Joe Biden, and he pardoned his son as a means of protecting himself, there would be outcry all over the world about it.
Oh, please, there would be
heads would roll.
There would be heads on spikes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Being marched down the street. You know, like a macabre audience watching you.
You know, yeah, and you know they keep saying that, oh, Trump's sons are just, it's the same situation for Trump. Well, what has any of his children done that rises to the level of anything that Hunter Biden has been proven to have done?
Yeah, receipts, please. That would be nice.
Yeah, no, but it's Trump, so everyone around him must automatically be guilty of something. Doesn't matter what, just slap a fucking charge on him and you know, guilty.
Yep. And I mean, like, if the parties were reversed, well, if the parties were reversed while Trump is in office, if not just a Republican president, but specifically Trump, if this was Trump instead of Biden, and the Trump family instead of the Biden family, there might even be military action to deal with the situation.
Oh yeah.
Right, and I'm not saying that that's what should happen in this case. It's simply how different things would be, because you know, it's a difference between anti-existing establishment, political establishment, because Trump's not political establishment; he's business establishment. Very different.
Mm-hmm.
Although they use each other, but he may not have had the same benefit. But if that were the case, it's what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So next week we'll start with Laptop from Hell, and then move on to the report. And this report is not short. Okay, it's got like 600 some pages. We aren't gonna read all 600 pages, but we will go through some highlights and take a look at things. And the main thing, the thing I'm primarily interested in with regard to business-related crimes is Ukraine. I also have an upcoming discussion planned that, in my opinion, is related to this, where in the upcoming discussion, we are going to look at the history of America's interference in Iranian politics, beginning with World War I think, is what I found. But we're gonna have some specific focus on the coup that the United States staged in Iran in 1953, because a lot of what's happening today in the Middle East that the United States is involved in is directly traceable back to that. And it was the same, like, our government installed the Zelensky administration. Our government engaged in a coup to do that, and then genocided the Russian nationals who objected to it. Like, it just... Because I learned about the genocide part this year, it's hard for me to even talk about this. This is so repulsive. I can't even begin to... There's a lot of stuff that we were never taught about in school. And as I'm going back and looking at U.S. military actions in other countries where we were trying to promote democracy, this isn't the first time. This is just routine for the administration, or not the administration, but the establishment. And it has been for longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
So, to understand it, we're going to look at that history.
Cool.
And it's partly because this is the story of men's exploitation by the establishment of the United States as cannon fodder and pawns in war and contract killers. This is all the exploitation, manipulation, corruption, and discarding of men. And if we don't pay attention to it, it'll never stop.
Yeah.
So we're going to look into it. We're going to dig some nasty-ass dirt up and look at it and get it, people recognizing it and understanding it and pissed off about it, talking about it, and demanding change.
Cool.
So, if anything happens to me in the meantime, just so you all know, I'm not suicidal. I haven't been suicidal
Neither am I.
for 30 years. So, I love you guys. And with that, now you know what's coming. We will see you next Thursday. Thanks to everybody for listening. I know this stuff's dry, but it's very important. Thanks to my two co-hosts for going through this with me. Thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.